For more, we turn to Jeremy Kuzmarov, professor and author of The Russians Are Coming Again, the First Cold War as Tragedy and the Second as a Farce. Professor Kuzmarov, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Moscow released the testimony of these Ukrainian naval sailors who are currently being detained by the Russians. They admitted that they intended to provoke Russian deferral security services and that they deliberately ignored commands to stop. What do you think of the Ukrainian sailors' testimony?
Well, this seems to have some appearances of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which started the Vietnam War. I mean, the Ukrainians are claiming that those statements were coerced. It is a possibility, but from Russia's viewpoint, the mission in the first place would be provocative because it was towards Crimea, which Russia has asserted claims over. And it was a counterintelligence mission. It was not a commercial ship. So Russia naturally would view that with suspicion. And I mean, what is particularly suspicious is the fact that Poroshenko immediately, declared martial law, and there's talk about abrogating the election in March, which the polls show that he's losing. So this would give the indication that this is very politicized. And I mean, there's been greater fighting in the past. This incident was serious, but Russia and Ukraine have been fighting for a long time, and there's been worse incidents and worse violence, but that was never used as a basis for declaring martial law. So many are feeling that this is very political and a political maneuver, and given the use of the Navy, for some it smacks of another Gulf of Tonkin.
Yeah, especially given that they have confessed in saying that this was intentional. Now, a lot of Western countries are responding. The European Union is already discussing possible sanctions on Russia after the clash. How many votes do the Europeans need in order to pass the sanctions, and will they pass sanctions against Russia?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I think what we see is a bias towards Russia, and that there are other agendas at play here. There's been an attempt to encircle and isolate Russia. I mean, Russia, yeah, it's possible maybe Russia overreacted, but Ukraine clearly was engaging in provocative maneuvers. And I mean, if we look in the broader context, the whole crisis over Crimea started with a coup d'etat that occurred in February of 2014 that was supported by the Western powers. So they want to make like Russia's the bad guy, but they're not looking at Ukrainian action. And there's, I think, an underlying agenda at play, which is to isolate Russia and to target the Putin regime and to expand NATO.
Well, and that's exactly what we're seeing that the Western countries are doing. They've come out and spoken out in support of Ukraine. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley called for Russia to cease its unlawful conduct. Now, what effect will this have on the already tense relationship between the U.S. and Russia?
I think it has a very negative effect, combined with Trump, pulling out of the INF agreement, the Internuclear Forces Agreement, combined with also the Trump administration increasing military support to Ukraine, because the Obama administration had been providing non-lethal support, but Trump escalated to include lethal military support. So I think this is just one other incident that could be used as a basis for continuing the strategy of trying to isolate Russia and for expanding the United States and European and Western support for the Ukrainian military, which in its war against eastern Ukraine. And the Ukrainian military is engaged in a lot of atrocities that are not being documented in Western media, and has caused a lot of displacement and suffering for the eastern Ukrainian population.
Well, this is definitely giving a lot of Western countries room for criticism, like you said. Now, I want your opinion as a historian of the Cold War. How do you interpret these events from a historical perspective?
Well, firstly, yeah, I think there's the possible Gulf of Tonkin analogy. And also, yeah, I think dangerously we're sliding into a renewed Cold War. And one of the features of the original Cold War was proxy war. I mean, luckily, the two major powers never fought each other, but there are all kinds of proxy wars that develop all around the world. And Ukraine is shaping into a major proxy war between the United States and West versus Russia. And during the first Cold War, those proxy wars often had a terrible effect for the local population. And I think that's what we're seeing in the Ukraine. The eastern Ukrainian population has been suffering. And I think that's one of the dangers of a new Cold War developing, is that more proxy wars will break out. and that this will have a bad effect on many people around the world, and it will also divert our spending. We're going to spend more and more money on weapons, particularly if the U.S. falls through on pulling out of the INF. It could pave the way for an unfettered arms race and unfettered investment in nuclear weapons, and that's a waste of our resources and creates a dangerous prospect for all of humanity.
Well, with the G20 summit coming in just days, and President Trump expected to possibly meet with President Putin, we'll have to see what this comes out of that with the Western-Russian relationship. So thank you so much, Professor Kuzmarov, for your expertise.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.